The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glare over the sterile conference room where I sat, a heavy silence enveloping the air. It was 3 p.m., the appointed hour for my termination, a moment I had anticipated with a cold detachment that surprised even me. I had known it was coming. The signs were there, written in the subtle glances exchanged among the executives, the whispered conversations that ceased as I entered the room. I steeled myself, refusing to give in to the anxiety that twisted in my gut. This was just another game, and I was still holding the cards. As the door swung open, HR stepped in, a forced smile plastered across her face, a mask of feigned sympathy. "Thank you for coming in, unnamed. Please have a seat." She gestured toward the chair at the far end of the table, a clear indication of my place in the hierarchy that was about to be reinforced. I took my seat, the cool leather against my skin, a reminder of the corporate armor I wore daily. The executives filed in shortly after, their expressions a mixture of relief and unease. They exchanged brief glances, and I could almost hear the unspoken communication between them. I had been a thorn in their side for too long, my insistence on safeguarding the encryption keys seen as a hindrance to their plans. They did not understand the value of what I had built, nor did they care. To them, I was merely an obstacle, a cog in a machine that they were eager to dismantle. "We appreciate your contributions to the company," unnamed, one of the executives started, his voice smooth, calculated. "However, we've decided to go in a different direction. This isn't personal, it's just business." The words rolled off his tongue like a rehearsed line, devoid of any real emotion. I kept my expression neutral, masking the surge of anger that threatened to break through. "Different direction?" I echoed, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "You mean to say you're letting go of the one person who understands the importance of the encryption keys? The one who built the systems that keep your data secure?" The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I could see the executives squirm in their seats, discomfort flickering across their faces like a candle's flame in the wind. They had underestimated me, thinking they could simply discard my contributions without consequence. "We have other plans for that, unnamed," HR interjected, her tone clipped, attempting to regain control of the conversation. "We're moving towards a more streamlined approach, one that doesn't require your unique expertise." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms as I studied them. Their confidence was misplaced. They believed they could erase my contributions and the knowledge I held, but they were about to learn a valuable lesson. "You think this is just about the job?" I said, my voice low, almost a whisper. "You're playing with fire, and you have no idea how much I hold in my hands. You don't just terminate someone like me without consequences." HR shifted uncomfortably, her composure wavering. "This is a necessary step for the company's future. We have to prioritize." "Prioritize?" I interrupted, my words cutting through her excuses. "You're prioritizing your own interests over the security of this organization. You're blind to the risks you're taking." The executives exchanged glances again, their facade of control crumbling slightly. I could see the doubt creeping in, the fear of what they were dismissing as irrelevant. I had built the systems that safeguarded the company, and they were about to discover just how vulnerable they had made themselves. As they continued to drone on about severance packages and future endeavors, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. They thought they were rid of me, but in reality they had just unleashed a storm. The termination was not an end, it was merely the beginning of a new game, one where I would hold the upper hand. I rose from my seat, the weight of the moment settling on my shoulders. "You'll regret this decision. You have no idea what I'm capable of." With that, I turned on my heel and walked out of the conference room, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the now empty space. The fluorescent lights flickered behind me, a stark reminder of the cold reality I was leaving behind. The game had changed, and I was ready to play. As I stepped into the hallway, I felt a surge of adrenaline. The termination had been a shock to them, but I was more than just a number on a list. I had the keys to their downfall, and I wasn't going to let them forget it. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They had made a grave mistake, and I would ensure they paid for it. As I navigated the sterile hallways of the corporate building, the weight of the termination still pressed down on me, but it was accompanied by a burgeoning sense of purpose. The executives had their assumptions, their miscalculations, and I could almost hear their dismissive laughter echoing in my ears. They believed I was just the tech guy, the one who spent too long worrying about encryption keys and not enough time playing the corporate game. But they didn't understand the complexity of the systems I had crafted, nor the critical importance of those keys. I had built a fortress around their data, a complex web of security protocols that kept our sensitive information safe from external threats. Lines of code that I had written meticulously over the years formed the backbone of the company's cybersecurity. The encryption keys I had developed were the crown jewels, the very essence of our digital security. Yet to the executives, they were mere lines in a budget report, easily overlooked in their quest for a streamlined approach. "We need to move faster," they had said. "We need to cut unnecessary costs." But what they didn't realize was that my expertise was not a cost, it was an investment in their future. I had seen the consequences of neglecting cybersecurity firsthand. Companies that underestimated their vulnerabilities became cautionary tales, and I had no intention of becoming one of them. I paused outside the glass doors of my former office, the place where I had spent countless hours immersed in my work. The room was empty now, stripped of my presence, but the systems I had built still hummed quietly in the background, a testament to my efforts. I could almost hear the data flowing, the encryption algorithms churning away, still secure under my care, even if they hadn't realized it yet. In that moment, I felt a spark of defiance. I had been dismissed, yes, but I was not powerless. The executives underestimated my capacity for disruption. They thought they could simply sever ties with me and carry on as if nothing had changed. Little did they know I had plans, and they revolved around the very keys they had chosen to ignore. As I made my way to the stairwell, I pulled out my phone, accessing the secure network I had built. It was easy to slip back into my old routines, to navigate the system with the ease of a seasoned player. I needed to assess the situation, to gauge how far I could go without raising alarms. The executives had made their move, but I was still in the game. The new direction, I muttered to myself as I descended the stairs, will lead them straight into a trap. I could already envision the chaos that would ensue. They had built their strategy on shaky foundations, and it wouldn't take much for the entire structure to come crashing down. All it would take was a little push, a spark to ignite the fire of their hubris. I rounded a corner and found myself in front of the IT department, my former domain. A wave of nostalgia washed over me as I remembered the late nights spent troubleshooting, the adrenaline rush of solving complex problems. I had been a guardian of the company's data, a role they had now deemed unnecessary, but I was about to show them exactly how essential I had been. "Hey, unnamed, what's up?" one of my former colleagues called out, a hint of surprise in her voice. I feigned a casual demeanor, masking the intensity of the moment. "Just checking in on a few things," I replied, forcing a smile. "You guys are still keeping up with the updates, right?" The conversation felt like a dance, each step carefully calculated. I needed to gather information to see how much the executives had shared about my departure. The more I knew, the better I could prepare my next move. "Yeah, but you know how it is," she shrugged. "Management wants to change things up. They're talking about some new protocols that might be simpler, more efficient. I'm not so sure it's a good idea, though." Her words were like music to my ears. They were indeed discussing changes, and I could already foresee the pitfalls. My heart raced as I considered the possibilities. If they implemented a less secure system, it would only take a matter of time before they found themselves in a precarious position. "You should be careful, keep an eye on things," I said, my tone serious. "You know how important our security is. Don't let them convince you that everything's fine without me." She nodded, concern etched on her face as I slipped out of the room, the weight of my knowledge heavy on my shoulders. I could not afford to let them see my intentions just yet. I had to be strategic, to bide my time until the perfect opportunity arose. Walking through the halls, I felt the thrill of the game surging through me. The executives thought they had won, that they could simply erase me from their narrative. But I was not just a player, I was the game master, and I would dictate the rules from here on out. I would turn their underestimation into their undoing, one calculated move at a time. As I slipped into the shadows of the corporate labyrinth, I felt an electrifying blend of anger and determination coursing through my veins. Each step echoed with the promise of retribution, and my mind raced with the implications of my termination. The executives had their reasons, their misguided notions of efficiency, but they had failed to comprehend the precariousness of their position. They were blind to the fact that I was the linchpin holding their entire operation together. The fluorescent lights flickered above me, casting long shadows that danced along the walls as if echoing my turmoil. I made my way to the secure server room, a place I had designed to be impenetrable. It was ironic, really, that I was now an intruder in my own domain. The access badge hung from my neck like a noose, a reminder of my recent fall from grace. I approached the door, my heart pounding in my chest as I swiped the card. The reader beeped, but the light turned red, a clear indication that my access had been revoked. My breath caught in my throat, they had cut me off. The executives had made their move, and now I was outside looking in. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. They believed they could erase my presence, but they didn't understand the depth of my knowledge. I was not just a cog in their machine, I was the architect, and they were about to discover the consequences of their actions. I stepped back, scanning the hallway for any signs of life. The quiet was oppressive, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing in my mind. I needed to find a way back in, to access the systems that I had built and secure the encryption keys that were now more critical than ever. The executives were making a grave mistake, one that would cost them dearly. I turned on my heel and headed toward the IT department again, my mind racing with possibilities. I had to act quickly to gather information before they implemented changes that could compromise everything I had worked for. I knocked on the door and it swung open to reveal a familiar face, a colleague who had been there through the late nights and the endless lines of code. "Hey, unnamed," she exclaimed, surprise flickering across her features. "What are you doing here? I thought you were, gone." "I am, but I need to know what's going on in here." "Have they changed anything yet?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside. She hesitated, glancing around as if to ensure no one was listening. "They're pushing for some new protocols, something about streamlining processes. But honestly, it feels rushed. I'm not sure it's a good idea." My heart raced at her words. They were indeed making changes, reckless ones that could leave their data vulnerable. I needed to find a way to exploit their ignorance. "You need to keep an eye on things. They're underestimating the risks and it's going to backfire on them." "I know, but they're not listening. They think they're doing what's best for the company," she replied, concern etched on her face. I nodded, suppressing a grim smile. They were so confident in their decision, so certain of their new direction, but I was about to turn their world upside down. I needed to gather more intel to ascertain how deep their naivety ran. "Just be careful, okay? Don't let them convince you that everything's fine without me." As I left the IT department, the thrill of the impending chaos sent a shiver down my spine. I was still in the game and I had the power to influence the outcome. I could already feel the pieces falling into place, each move calculated to unravel their carefully constructed facade. They thought they could erase me, but I was the storm brewing just beyond the horizon, ready to unleash my fury. I navigated the hallways with purpose, my mind racing through the possibilities. I needed to find a way back into the server room to access the encryption keys that I had safeguarded for so long. They had underestimated the importance of those keys, and it was time for them to realize the magnitude of their mistake. As I approached the elevator, I considered my options. I had a few contacts within the company who still respected my work, who understood the importance of what I had built. If I could reach out to them discreetly, I might be able to gather the support I needed to regain access. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor, my mind racing with strategies. I needed to act quickly before they had a chance to implement their new protocols. The executives believed they were safe, but they had left a gaping hole in their defenses by dismissing me. As the elevator descended, I felt the weight of my knowledge settle on my shoulders like a cloak. I had witnessed the consequences of corporate arrogance before, and I would not let it happen again. The encryption keys were not just digital artifacts, they were the lifeline of the company's security, and I was the only one who truly understood their significance. I stepped out of the elevator and headed toward the parking garage. I needed to get to my car and devise a plan. The executives had made their decision, but now it was my turn to make mine. I would not let their ignorance go unpunished. As I drove away from the corporate building, I felt a surge of power. The termination had been a shock to them, but it had ignited something within me, a fire that would not be easily extinguished. I would make them see the error of their ways, one calculated move at a time. The game had changed, and I was ready to play. As I drove away from the corporate building, the landscape blurred into a mix of gray and green, but my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each more intense than the last. I had been dismissed, yes, but I was far from defeated. The termination had felt like a lightning strike, sudden, shocking, and illuminating the darkness of my situation. I clenched the steering wheel, feeling a surge of empowerment coursing through my veins. The executives had made their choice, casting aside the one person who understood the intricacies of their security systems, the one person who held the keys to their downfall. They thought they could sever me from the equation as if I were nothing more than a flawed component in their corporate machinery. But they were mistaken. I was the architect of their fortress, and they had just opened the gates. I pulled into a secluded parking lot, my heart racing as I considered my next steps. I needed to formulate a plan, a strategy that would leverage the knowledge I possessed. The encryption keys were not merely technical assets. They were the backbone of the security protocols I had established. Without them, the company was vulnerable, exposed to the very threats I had safeguarded against. I had to act quickly, before they had the chance to implement any changes that would compromise everything I had worked for. Sitting in my car, I took a deep breath, allowing the gravity of the situation to settle in. The executives believed they were moving towards a more efficient future, but I saw the cracks in their foundation, the disastrous consequences that lay ahead. They had chosen to disregard my expertise, but I would ensure they regretted it. Reaching for my phone, I scrolled through my contacts, searching for someone who could help me. There were a few former colleagues I trusted, individuals who still respected my work and understood the importance of cybersecurity. I needed allies, people who could help me regain access to the systems I had designed, and perhaps even rally support among those who remained loyal to me. I dialed the first number, my pulse quickening as the phone rang. After a few tense moments, a familiar voice answered. "Hey, it's me. I need to talk to you about something urgent." I could hear the surprise in his voice, the disbelief at my sudden call. "I thought you were, done with all this." "I am, but I need your help. They're making changes that could jeopardize everything we built, and I can't just stand by and watch them ruin it all. If you can, gather a few of our colleagues. I need to talk to them to warn them about what's coming." There was a pause, and I could sense the wheels turning in his mind. "All right, but we need to be careful. They're watching us more closely now." "I know, but I'm counting on you. We can't let them dismantle the security measures that keep this place running. They think they're moving in a new direction, but they're heading straight for disaster." "I'll reach out to the others. Just be safe, okay?" He sounded hesitant but determined. I hung up, a sense of urgency propelling me forward. I needed to act, to gather my allies and prepare to strike at the heart of their arrogance. With the sun beginning to set, casting an amber hue across the sky, I drove back towards the corporate headquarters, my mind racing with possibilities. I would not just sit back and let them dictate the terms of this game. I would reclaim my power. The encryption keys were still in my grasp, even if they thought they had cut me off. I would find a way to access them, to remind the executives of the precariousness of their position. As I parked in a discreet spot near the building, I took a moment to collect my thoughts. I had to be strategic, careful about how I approached this next phase. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me, a heady mix of anger and determination. I would turn their underestimation into their undoing. I slipped into a side entrance, the familiar layout of the corporate building comforting despite the chaos of my thoughts. The sterile halls felt like a labyrinth, each corner holding the weight of my past decisions. I moved with purpose, recalling the layout of the security systems as I navigated my way toward the IT department. It was time to gather intel and lay the groundwork for my next move. The IT team was still buzzing with activity, oblivious to the storm that was brewing just outside their bubble. I could see my former colleagues, their heads bent over screens, engrossed in their work. They had no idea what was coming. As I stepped into the room, I felt a surge of nostalgia mixed with resolve. I had fought tooth and nail to build this team, and I would not let it crumble. "Hey," I called out, forcing a casual tone. A few heads turned, surprise flashing across their faces. "I just wanted to check in and see how things are going. Heard there were some changes coming down from management." One of my former teammates looked up, concern etched in her features. "Yeah, they're pushing for a new system, something that seems rushed. It doesn't feel right." I nodded, my instincts kicking into high gear. "You need to be careful. They're not seeing the bigger picture and it's going to backfire. The security measures we put in place are critical, and they're throwing it all away for some misguided idea of efficiency." Her brow furrowed as she absorbed my words. "I know, but they're adamant about making these changes. They think it's better for the company." I leaned in, my voice low but urgent. "Trust me, they're wrong. If they implement these changes, it will leave us vulnerable. We need to organize to make sure everyone understands what's at stake here." The atmosphere shifted, a sense of tension filling the air. I could see the wheels turning in their minds, the realization dawning on them. They were starting to understand the gravity of the situation. As I left the IT department, I felt a sense of purpose wash over me. I was no longer just a pawn, I was a player in this game, and I would ensure that the executives faced the consequences of their actions. The encryption keys were still my greatest asset, and I would find a way to reassert my control over them. With each step I took, the fire of retribution burned brighter within me. The executives thought they had won, but I was just getting started. I would turn their blind ambition into chaos, and in the process, reclaim my place as the guardian of their digital fortress. The game had changed, and I was determined to emerge victorious, one calculated move at a time. As I stepped away from the IT department, the weight of my knowledge felt like a double-edged sword. I was filled with a renewed sense of purpose, but along with it came the stark realization of the consequences I needed to navigate. The executives had fired me, but they had no idea what I was capable of. I was no longer just a cog in their machine, I was the very architect of their downfall. They had underestimated not only my skills but also my resolve. I could already see the cracks forming in their plans, the inevitable chaos awaiting them. They believed they were moving towards efficiency, but their lack of foresight would expose them to vulnerabilities they had never anticipated. The encryption keys I had safeguarded were not merely pieces of data. They were the essence of the company's security framework. Without them, they were sitting ducks, vulnerable to external threats that I had fought so hard to keep at bay. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the corporate campus as I made my way back to my car. I could feel the adrenaline pulsing through my veins, the anticipation of what was to come igniting a fire within me. I was ready to unleash a storm, a calculated retaliation that would show the executives just how grave their mistake had been. As I drove away from the building, my mind raced with possibilities. I had to act swiftly, to leverage the knowledge I had about the encryption keys and the systems I designed. I would not merely allow them to dismantle the security I had built, I would turn the tables on them. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat and I quickly glanced down to see a message from one of my former colleagues. "We're in. We need to meet and discuss what to do next." A grin crept onto my face, a sense of solidarity blooming in the midst of my turmoil. I replied quickly, arranging a time and place. Their willingness to listen, to rally behind our shared vision of security, was a crucial piece of the puzzle. The cafe we chose was unassuming, its warm ambience a stark contrast to the cold corporate world I had just left behind. I arrived early, my heart racing with anticipation. As my colleagues filtered in, I could see the determination etched on their faces. We were all aware of the stakes, the need to act before the executives implemented changes that could jeopardize everything we had built together. "Thanks for coming," I said as they settled into their seats. "I know things have been tense since my departure, but we need to be proactive. The new protocols they're discussing are a disaster waiting to happen." The group nodded, their expressions serious. One of them, a former programmer named Alex, leaned in. "We've been hearing whispers about the new system and it doesn't sound secure at all. They're pushing for simplicity, but that usually means cutting corners." I took a deep breath, my mind racing with the implications. Exactly, they think they can streamline without understanding the risks involved. If they proceed, they'll be opening the door to threats we've spent years guarding against. We need to gather the team, inform them of what's truly at stake. As we strategized, I felt a sense of camaraderie build among us. There was a shared understanding, a collective determination to protect what we had all worked so hard to establish. The more we delved into the specifics of the encryption keys and security protocols, the clearer it became. We had to act before the executives made their move. With a plan forming, I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. This was my chance to reclaim my place, not just as a tech expert, but as a guardian of the company's integrity. We discussed ways to communicate discreetly with our colleagues to ensure that the message of caution spread like wildfire through the halls of the company. As the meeting drew to a close, I felt the fire of retribution burning bright within me. I was ready to turn the executives' arrogance into chaos, to expose their recklessness for all to see. The encryption keys were still within my reach, and I intended to remind them just how crucial they were. With a renewed sense of purpose, I stood up, my voice steady. "This isn't just about protecting our jobs, it's about safeguarding the future of this company. We need to make them understand the magnitude of their mistake before it's too late." Our eyes locked, and I saw the resolve mirrored back at me. They were ready to fight, ready to take a stand against the very executives who had dismissed us. Together, we would ensure that the importance of the encryption keys was not lost in the shuffle of corporate ambition. As we left the cafe, the evening air was cool against my skin, a sharp contrast to the fire that raged within. I felt invigorated, the rush of adrenaline propelling me forward. I was no longer just a victim of corporate disdain. I was a force to be reckoned with, determined to reclaim my power and protect what was rightfully ours. In the days that followed, I worked tirelessly alongside my colleagues, gathering intel and spreading the message of caution. We reached out to others who had been loyal to me, those who understood the value of the encryption keys and the systems I had built. Slowly but surely, a network of support began to form, a collective voice rising against the executives' reckless pursuit of efficiency. As the executives pushed for changes, I watched from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. I knew the vulnerabilities they were exposing themselves to, and I was prepared to exploit them. The encryption keys were my weapon, and I was ready to wield them. Finally, the day arrived when the executives announced their new protocols to the entire company. I stood in the back of the room, my heart pounding as I listened to their hollow promises of efficiency and security. They had no idea that just beneath the surface lay a storm, ready to unleash chaos at the first sign of weakness. As they concluded their presentation, I exchanged quick glances with my allies, a silent understanding passing between us. It was time to act. We would expose their miscalculations and force them to confront the consequences of their decisions. The moment came when the executives opened the floor for questions. I raised my hand, my voice steady as I addressed the panel. Can you explain how the new protocols will ensure the same level of security we had under the previous system? The executives exchanged nervous glances, their confidence beginning to waver. We believe these changes will streamline our processes and ultimately enhance security, one of them replied, but his voice lacked conviction. I could almost see the cracks forming in their facade. Enhanced security, I pressed, my voice rising slightly. How can you ensure that when you're cutting out the very systems that have protected us from threats, you're playing a dangerous game and the stakes are much higher than you realize? The room fell silent, the tension palpable as my colleagues nodded in agreement. They could see the fear creeping into the executives' expressions, the realization that their arrogance had left them vulnerable. In that moment, I felt a surge of empowerment. I was no longer just a dismissed employee, but a voice of reason in a sea of corporate hubris. The executives stammered, trying to regain control of the conversation, but it was too late. The seed of doubt had been planted and my colleagues were rallying behind me. We need to reconsider these changes, one of them spoke up, echoing my concerns. Our security is at stake and we can't afford to take such risks. As murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd, I could feel the tide turning. The executives were losing their grip, their carefully constructed narrative unraveling before their eyes. They had underestimated not only my knowledge but the power of collective action. In that moment, I realized the true impact of my knowledge. I was not just fighting for my own interests, I was championing a cause that resonated with everyone in that room. Together, we would hold the executives accountable for their reckless decisions, and together, we would protect the future of the company. As the meeting drew to a close, I felt a sense